Hello. All right, I'm just getting myself situated. I'm assuming, I'm trusting that this is going to start to flow appropriately. It started really coming in very strongly yesterday after I decided not to do it. It started coming in really strongly at about 10:30 at night. I almost went online, and then I just wound up taking copious notes. So we're just going to wait and see if it comes in. I'm sure it will once I get going. Hang on a minute. I have a whole bunch of notes about topics that I know I've needed to talk about for a long time. Hang on. We are in a period of energy now where, hang on. It's always a little choppy at the beginning. Bear with me. Also, my animals are around. Usually I like to have them on me, on the live stream too, because I want that vibration of multi-species to be transmitted as well. They are here. They're just not on the camera. She's probably going to join me in a minute. She kept picking at me, so I put her back on her stand. Tia, the bird. Hang on a minute. We're in a congested kind of, there's a bit of a traffic jam of energies. This happened on the last live stream too. And I've had a couple of sessions with people since then. And I know that we're dealing with, well, basically that's what we're dealing with because it keeps coming up. It's like an intersection where there are many different energy streams that are vying for dominance, and some of them are urgent, and it's very much like a traffic jam. There's an intersection in Kingston that's like that, where in fact, that's the image that keeps popping into my mind, where it's like a 5-way intersection with a whole bunch of construction that's going on right now. And there are police officers there who are directing traffic. And there's also a traffic light or several traffic lights. And so it's very, very confusing. And that's really the energy that's prevalent in the collective now. We're at a period of, you know this already, a period of transition that's unlike any period of transition previously. And the energy streams are traveling at different rates and also at different levels. So I'm going to wind up talking about 5D chess. If you can bear with me for a second. There are always last minute adjustments on these things. I try to get it done. Hang on a minute. I'm going to turn something off and get a tissue. Go lie down. Hang on a minute. I don't think anyone's here anyway yet. Just 1 second. Go lie down. I was recently given information about the divine masculine delay. Those of us in the Twin Flame group, there is an energetic dynamic that has caused a portion of the problem. And I just wanted to talk about that a little bit. What is meant to be a consistent figure 8 designed to flow equally on both sides has not been doing so. There's been a real problem there. The problem that we've been having is one of areas of density, the fact that the dense levels move a lot slower and they don't receive energy at the same rate. So usually with the twin flames, genuine pairs, actually I think even pairs that aren't the real ones, even that pattern altogether, there's a problem where we're trying to get all of the levels to line up. When we talk about energy being aligned, there are roughly, I don't really like to put a number on it, but there's roughly, I guess it depends on however you want to divide it. I was going to say 15, but it really just depends on how you want to divide it. It could be almost an infinite number. Levels as we step up. And what we're trying to do, it's on a spiral, time is on a spiral. And what we're trying to do is there's going to be a point where where certain windows of opportunity line up like an elevator shaft, where all of the levels have an opportunity. Then the elevator is going to rapidly go up level by level, and everybody who's ready gets to kind of go on board. But you have to be prepared for that so that when the doors open, you take your chance, you take your opportunity. Getting the top level to align with the densest level. The top level tends to, top level tends to move a lot faster. We also receive information very fast. In the twins, there's usually one that's very dense and very 3D oriented, prioritizes the physical realm, and they're very deeply embedded in it. They are not the ones typically who get the messages. It takes a long time for kind of the head region to open up. They're usually very open on to density. They prioritize. They prioritize looking at the physical world and paying a lot of attention to the physical world, and usually gathering abundance and building their fortune or their ego, everything that's physically based. That's where their priority is. And as a general rule, they're not particularly open on the top end. So that even if you're yelling and if your spirit is trying to get their attention, it usually doesn't work, or not that easily. Or even if they get the messages, they tend to dismiss it, ignore it. They tend to do it repeatedly. Doesn't matter how many times they get a message, they don't see the connections between things. That's a big thing. So the messages aren't getting through. So the ones that typically need to take the action. We're saying that the masculine hasn't been taking the action. We really need the masculine to take the action. We really need the denser of the twins to take the action. Density tends to be a lot harder to move. You have to take action in the physical world, and then you have to connect with the twin that's the higher of the two, which is less dense. But that's usually not what happens. Usually they prioritize taking action in the physical world, and since it's already ego based, they merely gather more. So they're kind of stockpiling and hoarding. Where they are taking action, it's kind of, they prioritize caring for themselves and their immediate circle. It's like me and my group. So everything is just building a heavier and heavier clog, and they almost never really tide the amount that they're supposed to get an abundant flow. Very often there's an ignoring of the feminine twin. That happens across the board. The feminine twins, the masculine and the feminine energy streams are crossed within us anyway. So we do have the telepathy, etc. I know for my part, it's very difficult to tell sometimes what's actually coming from or for me and what's the message coming for or from my twin. So we're getting a lot of cross circuitry that has kind of misfired or it hasn't worked very well, because I know that I've got Venus in Aries, Moon in Aries, and North Node in Aries. I'm very inclined to take immediate action, very inclined to be a leader, and I don't hesitate to take risks and do things like that. Also, I'm hyper aware on the top end. So I will typically receive the message that's for my twin, and I'm not sure who it's from or who it's for, who it's supposed to go to, but I will almost always take the immediate action, and my twin takes no action. The message doesn't even reach him, or if it does reach him, it's like somebody else took care of it, so I'm not going to do it. I have no evidence of this since I haven't heard from him at all. I came down with a large group of people, and we're all intertwined with in an energetic group dynamic it's more complicated than a twin scenario. It's a group dynamic that was put in place in the Joan of Arc lifetime, and it was designed more like a small net that's designed to expand. But there's a lot of interweaving, and there's an entire sequence with a group of people. So that's wasn't what I was going to talk about. Hang on a second. So one of the problems that we're having is that very often we get the message that's really meant for our twin, and we think it's ours, and we act on it, but it results in the feminine kind of being overactive and doing more than we should sometimes, and our counterpart, whoever it is, takes less action. So the situation, the way we planned it, it actually got worse in this incarnation. It was designed that in the Joan of Arc lifetime, we seeded a template, and then my lifetime in this lifetime was supposed to come down and be the second half of that, and it kind of has, but instead of fixing it, it actually doubled down, and it has gone into hyper contrast. It wasn't supposed to get this bad. This is actually something that we're trying to correct now, but I don't see the rest of my team anywhere. I'm really trusting that there's a divine plan, because I don't know what the hell happened. I feel that at this point, there's just going to be, it didn't go the way that it was intended to go. There was an incredibly well thought out and elaborate plan for this lifetime, and it involved the world's largest homeschool, and it was basically supposed to go and bring about a direct rebalancing and an escalation or an acceleration of growth. And we did get the acceleration of growth, but it didn't happen the way that it was intended. So on the level up, there's a massive correction that it's just a lot of the sudden changes or lurches that are coming around in this time of year are happening because the veil is relatively thin and it's kind of dilated. So we're making some very rapid course corrections. We're bringing back very rapid course corrections. All right. So I was going to start talking about, I kind of wish I'd gone on last night. Oh, no, they're saying I should go back and talk about this. 8 years ago, I was living in another apartment, and I was getting consistently at that time, my identity had just come back to me, those memories, and I was getting at that time double messages that would come in at the exact same time. These things would come in, but they were always opposite. They were hyperpolarized. So I would get urgent. They all always had a very urgent quality about it. I would get very strong, urgent messages like "Go stop," and it was something like it forces an action, and then I had to choose what to do. I feel like, so I know that I go through these things, this entire pattern, approximately 8 or 9 years ahead of the collective at this time, as Joan of Arc was approximately 600 years. Hang on. I just noticed who's on the call and made a connection between all of you. And Katrina, I think you and I should have a session. There's Katrina, also with what I'm talking about, I just happened to glance over and I see 1, 2, 3, 4, and you're all on this session at this time. And I think that that means I think we have manifestation going on too. Something to do with seizing an opportunity very quickly. There's an alignment because your last name's Heron, and I'm just triangulating data really quickly in my head. There's something to do with seizing an opportunity right now. We have the opportunity to do something, a rapid alignment. So yep, I'm getting a big yes. They're doing something now. They're shifting energy on the left side on an angle. So this wasn't something that I planned. It's just coming in. And the fact that you're all here and other people aren't here, that's also specific. I've been on for 15 minutes. I'm just kind of looking at the data. Hang on a second. I do have a whole bunch of things to talk about that's more meant for a larger group, but this particular small little group has something in common. So I'm just going to allow that to whatever comes in, comes in. There's something about world government that I have known about. The library that I have mentioned to some of you. I don't think I've mentioned it on a live stream. I keep having this dream where I'm there's a large castle. It's a recurring dream, which means it's not a dream. It's someplace that I go. There's a recurring theme with, there's a castle on a hillside. It looks like it's in Scotland or someplace like that. It's someplace I haven't been, but there's a dark gray stone castle on a steep hill. And it's a steep hill that has, it seems important. There are evergreens and they're very tall and it's a little bit damp and it looks a little bit like Scotland. I always notice the fact that it's dark. It's a dark forest green, the trees. I always notice that. It's not someplace I live. It's someplace I go. A little bit like when I was on the Council of Balance. I didn't live at the Council of Balance. It was someplace that we all met. Those of us on the Council of Balance would go to this location. And that was actually kind of in the clouds. It was a temple and we were all in statues, but this place isn't. This is a very steeply slanted, that's important, steeply slanted forest. Looks like it's someplace in Scotland, and it's a stone castle. And there's a whole bunch of hallways and everything, but there's one great big, enormous double-storied library. And when you walk in, it's just a big open space. You can see all the way up to the top. And then you can see all the levels and a stairway that goes up. And I've had this dream a number of times. There are great big oak doors, huge oak doors. And I'm always standing in the doorway with one of the doors open. And I'm looking out, waiting to see who else is coming because we're waiting for a whole bunch of women. And it's only women. It's like a circle of women. In 2013, I was told that I was the head of a circle of women, and it was a little bit like I wouldn't say a jury, but it's not a jury, but it's something like, for some reason, there's one person who is like the voice of the group, and for some reason, that's me. I don't know why. If there's a tie, I'm the one who makes a final decision, but there's usually not. It usually is a consensus. And I didn't think I was going to be talking about this at all. So much for my notes. But there's a great big oak library, and it has floor to ceiling shelves. And at the table, there's a humongous table with all of these chairs, and it's all vacant except for Angela, who's sitting there, and she's been waiting for a long time too. And in the corner, way over in the corner of the library by the windows, by the shelves, she's doing her own work, and she's got her nose, she's looking in the books, is Joanna. And someplace down, like I've passed the outside of the building enough to know where Camille is. Camille, I have seen her there before. She usually, except you're in the room today, but the times where I have seen Camille in this dream, she does make a presence. She does show up in the dream, but she's outside the building, and she's at the corner of the castle, like where the cornerstone is. And it's on the ground, like she's standing in pine needles. And I'm not sure exactly what she's doing. She hasn't gotten inside yet. That seems to be a really big theme of the dream. It's that we're just waiting for everybody else to get there. And somehow, Katrina, you're on this call, and you started off the comments by saying, "I am here." Thank you. I think that's no coincidence whatsoever. So I don't know who else is supposed to be in. I feel like there are 12 or 13 people ultimately who will be at the table. And I do know but they haven't told me who the other people are. I think it hasn't actually been decided yet. I feel like it's the ones who arrive, the ones who make it. It's a series. You go through a process to be there. It's not merely awakening, because a lot of people are awake. But this is a very specific job, and it has to do with world government, which I was going to talk about. That's actually one of the things that's on my list. Hang on. These live streams are always a little bit of a crapshoot, because I kind of never know what's going to come up. I have a lot to talk about regarding politics and world government. So the fact that we're all on this call, so that's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So 5 for change. All right. And it's Halloween. Okay, let's take it. Great. So let's just bring in whatever energy wants to come in. I was going to talk about, and now, so I'm not sure. I have to rethink my strategy now, because I was going to talk about the speed of change. We're at this juncture right now. Then they're showing me the intersection in Kingston again, where there has been a considerable traffic jam of energetic streams that need to be running smoothly, but they haven't been running smoothly. Some of them are stalled, some of them are broken and dismantled and not ready to go. There are gaps where we needed to, it hasn't been, there are gaps where we needed a bridge, and there are blocks or solidities where we needed something to get through. So I understand that there are very competing agendas, but I am also told that this isn't going to be the case for much longer, because certain things that have been in the way are going to be removed. I'm not entirely sure how that's happening. I do know that there's an action that's taking place. There's a separation, and then there's going to be some kind of a reunification of certain pieces, but some pieces are not coming back. The pieces that are slow. People who, I shouldn't say people, elements that were not moving, not only the institutions, but the also the individuals who were acting against the greater good of the collective, or there are also elements, I'm thinking back to this original group that I was in. Every single person came in with a specific piece. And then when it came time to, we had the opportunity and all of the tools. I'm thinking about 2013. We had all of the people gathered, and every person had their piece to add to a successful completion of the mission. And some people decided that they weren't going to contribute, or they were going to actively sabotage other members. They weren't going to contribute their piece. And so the entire plan just completely fell apart. But at least now we know who those people are. Like, who has the malice, who has the fear, who is just, for lack of a better term, just retarded and didn't figure it out in time. If you're really convinced that you're not going to change and you're right, you also can't come, because there's a way that we're supposed to network and engage with one another. You can't be afraid of conflict. You have to be able to stand up to differing views. You have to be able to bend and yield and collaborate just in a certain way to actually get something done. So moving on, now that we know where they are, there are people that are going to be not moving up the scale. And I'm honestly shocked, because I thought more of them are going to make it. I'm just really, frankly, extremely, I'm disappointed. I thought that more people were going to, get it. But all right. So speed of change. So the speed of change is, I'm sorry, the group that's at the table in my dream. It has to do with world government being led by the divine feminine. And there's a mechanism. I'm not going to talk too much about this, because not everybody is supposed to know about it. I don't want to go forward on an energetic platform of fear. I don't want to build that or put that in, but not everybody, it's not information that actually everyone is supposed to know. So if I wind up putting this live stream out on YouTube or on Facebook or wherever, I just saw 2727. Okay, I'm going to leave that where it was for a minute. So just because I have it on my pad and I'm going to get this topic out of the way, there are conflicting energy streams right now. That's why it's still running a little choppy. I feel as though the more I keep talking, it's going to wind up getting on a better roll. Hang on a second. The speed of change. There are three waves of three general waves, which you probably know. We're more divided by speed than anything else. And the division isn't a bad thing at all. It's actually just find your group, find your level of development that you're most comfortable with. So regarding the U.S. election and world government in general, the most rapid change and the layer on top are those individuals who don't want or need any external governmental body. We don't need a parent figure. We're willing to step up and actually be the ones to make the decisions. And also, it's less of a burden. It's actually quite freeing. But we kind of establish the rules for the rules of engagement, and we're weaving an energetic net very carefully, and in the spirit of cooperation with all beings, taking multiple views into consideration. And then once this network, this energetic network, is refined and we all agree on it, we're sending it down through to kind of infiltrate the lower levels. So there is actually a mechanism by which this is going to happen. Regarding the U.S. candidates, so the most rapid change is, I should say, those in favor of most rapid change are the ones who most likely are already completely out of the third dimensional system, or the existing system, the existing paradigm that agrees that we need an institution or some sort of external parental governing body. Those of us who, so there are just different levels of maturity, spiritual maturity. There still needs to be oversight or like a nanny kind of thing for those who are still asleep, or not. If you're asleep, you're probably not coming at this point, but who really just need steering. There are some who still really need like a teacher's aide or teacher's assistant or teacher. They just need teachers. They need somebody to walk with them and teach them how this is going to work. The most rapid level of change are people who are already sovereign, know the way it's supposed to work. We've seen it. We're telepathically connected to one another. This group is in that group. And the decision for the top level is do it yourself now. If you know what the change is, you do it yourself now. You step up, you rise to your authority, and you say, no, it's not going to go that way. That's crap. We're going to do it this way. And you actually step into leadership, and your energetic signature is the one that's going to radiate out, and you are the governing body. You don't wait to be elected. You simply take command and you step into your authority. Everybody in the U.S., everybody looks to the founding fathers and the Constitution, but there was a point that people were dissatisfied enough that they made an executive decision and said, this isn't the way it's supposed to be. It's supposed to go like this, and let's write it up. At the time, they're all white men. So we see now that was a half success. It was a step in the right direction, but now it's time for an additional step that includes women. And the women are actually supposed to be on top, the feminine energy, divine feminine energy. There's a geometry to it. Feminine energy is where you step into pluralism, you step into quantum. I'm going to talk about that a little bit later in the live stream. It has to do with the energy of Exodus. I'm going to get that. I want to finish this this thought first. There's a group of people who are rooting for Trump. The people who are rooting for Trump also fall into two camps. And I'm not going to talk so much about the ones who are, racist, and we all know about them. The ones that like him because it frees them up to spew hatred, whatever, and they like him for that reason. He is promoting liberty, though. Energetically, if you start to look at what's going on energetically, there is a liberation rather than a squelching of all things. So I could probably do an entire live stream, and I may wind up doing it. I don't know if it's going to be this one, the energy of Trump, energy behaves a certain way, and energy interacts with other energy a certain way. In order to get the entire planet uplifted, certain things have got to happen, and a lot of it looks really ugly before it gets better. In order to free the planet, you have to offer freedom, and you have to offer freedom. So if you keep squelching what's ugly, it never actually gets spewed out. You never get the vomit out. You have to go through a period of extreme ugliness and extreme, the shadow work. You go through a period of shadow work. So Trump supporters as a group are in two camps. There's those that recognize the need for the shadow work, and they're choosing a great amount of disruption because they know that it's what needs to get done. And the other supporters are that disruption. And this group kind of allows the other group have the explosion. We need to have the explosion, get it over with. It's a shorter term, extreme disruption that ultimately, if you were to measure it, is the less painful of the two. I was thinking about this before. Everything that is happening at this point of time, I was told in 2013 to look back at the Joan of Arc lifetime, because it was easy to illustrate it, since you could see, rather than trying to triangulate data and see the entire pattern, because it got extremely huge and confusing. I was told to look carefully at the Joan of Arc story, because everything, that was where the template was seated. And that entire story, every little occurrence in that story, when it expanded, if that's the center of the pizza, and it was also the center of the 100 Years' War. So we've got an extreme conflict in a tiny little space. Granted, it was a period of time, a long period of time, but I was told to look at that and all of the occurrences that happened, and it would help me see the larger pattern, which it did. It absolutely did. You go down as an extreme change agent, and you kind of take on the energy of hyperpolarization in order to affect a change. So if we're going to break out of something, we need to bust it out from the center. You plant a seed and you break the boulder. It's like that. It was a time of extreme compaction that was, if it was allowed to perpetuate, it would have created a bomb at this time. And what we needed to do was actually go in two different directions. There's a way that we had to we planned a way to go through the energy to get as many people free as possible, to get the most positive harvest. We call it a harvest. So they told me to look at all of the elements or the occurrences in that lifetime. And regarding Trump, it's very much like when I was Joan of Arc and they had me imprisoned, that there was a choice whether you want, and I had to loop back around. There was a choice whether to be burned at the stake or be imprisoned for my entire lifetime. And at that time, I was roughly 19. And not only just imprisoned, but also chained, and I wasn't even free to walk around the cell. So it's the choice between extremely excruciating, horrible pain short duration, and then you've got liberation and death, or the next 40 years or so, whatever, of anguish, being imprisoned. And you've got a choice. It's a horrible, horrible, horrible choice. But that's basically what the choice is in the United States right now. We're divided into camps. So the people who are really gung-ho for Trump are the ones who know the value of an extreme disruption. They're voting for a very, very rapid change, hyper change, an explosive change in a short amount of time. And there's also, in the Joan of Arc lifetime, there was a civil war in France, and France was nearly dead. There was a civil war and also an external invasion. And it's always the same thing. It's a civil war in addition to an external invasive force. The same thing is true with the American Revolutionary War. The same thing. It's a pattern. It's a fractal pattern that just every single time we find this pattern, we have to create a strong division to break away from whatever the restrictive force is, the one that's the external force. We're trying to get something like the letter Q. So you've got a perimeter, and then you've got a way in and out of the perimeter. That's what you need to find. There's a reason that the letter Q keeps popping up too. It's not just QAnon, it's also Q in Star Trek: The Next Generation. And then there's something about like a walled city and only one way. There's got to be a way to get in and a way to get out, is the point. So the people who are supporting Trump are voting for extremely painful but brief, and a very big, very dynamic, very active change kind of on the front end, but you're going to get a lot of progress so you can go straight to rebuilding after a lot of rubble. The people who are supporting Biden-Harris are the ones who typically, they tend to want, like, don't upset anyone. Let's just go, keep what they see as just as little disruption as possible. Just let everyone, just everyone calm down. And ultimately that leads to very little growth. They're usually the people who don't want their it's not that they don't want change. They usually don't, they're less willing to face the dark shadow themselves. They tend to want somebody else to do it. They tend to prefer a parent type government. They tend to not want to go and do something themselves. They tend to keep the peace by, nobody talk about it at the dinner table, or there should be an agency to deal with the homeless. There should be an agency, or somebody else will deal with it. It's not my own personal job to dive in and actually, oh, come on, not right now. No. Somebody's here. I'm not going to open it. I think I know who it is. I'm not going to open the door for trick-or-treaters right now. Hey, be quiet. Josh, shh. All right. He doesn't listen to me. Nope. So I'm actually going to bring her trick-or-treat candy. I'll have to walk down the block and give it to her later. I know who that is. So if the group that I said was in the library in my dream, there's a consensus, or there's a There are decisions made that we're going to send down via energy, and they're going to go, just as I said that, I saw 4455. They're going to go into, hang on a second. Just as I said that, they're doing something with my head. This may be something I'm not supposed to talk about right now. They're going to be passed to the appropriate people who are elected. There's a lot of work that's going on behind the scenes right now. Energetic work. Remember when I said that that Harris would likely get, if she gets the presidency, depending on what timeline you're on, if she gets the presidency, she's going to wind up getting a walk-in, because it's not a matter of electing the, it's not a matter, it's almost like whatever, the energy is going to take priority. The actual person who gets the office is actually of far less importance than the energy that we're going to put in there. And all of the people who are running, the candidates that are running, they don't have the control that people think that they have. It's a lot of this stuff is not going to be their personal decision. You're going to vote for an emblem or a persona or a figurehead. The same way when I went down as Joan of Arc, it wasn't, a lot of it wasn't me. It was an emblem or a kind of an icon or a persona. But there was an entire group of energies that were feeding into all of my decisions, and basically I was just a conduit for certain, so that certain action could come through and be landed into a form. That's what's going to happen to a lot of in politics in general. We're going to have a lot of walk-in energy. People who still, there's an entire strata of Americans, and we're not trying to be anti anybody. We're actually trying to get everybody on board. But some people are, there are certain strata who are just, they tend to carry more fear. So they want a parental hand to hold. They want a governing body because they're scared and they feel that they need an external parental force. So I was going to talk about this because it all ties in together. I know that my live streams really tend to be all over the place. They tend to want a external protection. But when somebody calls in external protection, not always, but some people do it just, they're not particularly fearful. They just do it as a matter of like almost a ritual. Whenever you start a tarot card reading, or there are some readers who do this, they call in a protective bubble of white light, which is appropriate. But often when we call in call for protection, or we want something that's surrounding us, we want protection, it's because we are carrying fear. We're fearful, and we're having the experience in that moment that there's something external that's bigger than us, and it could potentially harm us. And so we call in something. When like the bubble of white light, typically used for protection, calling a bubble of white light, surround yourself with a bubble of white light. But I can tell you as a strategist that if I'm strategizing, I was on the Council of Balance, if I'm strategizing for the dark, it's almost a giveaway. It is a giveaway. I'm not saying that it can't work. It can, but the fear is already inside, is the point. If you're scared and you surround yourself with a bubble of white light, you're already carrying fear. So darkness is in the bubble with you, is the point. So if you're it's almost I'm not telling you to do it or not do it. I have no objection to doing it. And if you do it with a clear intention, and especially if you do it honestly, sure, it can work for you. But there are also ways around it. Like if I was acting for the dark side, could I get through that bubble? Sure. All I would have to do would be to identify the fear that's already there and to access that. At any rate, I wasn't really going to talk about that. I was going to talk about, we're trying to create a ladder. So the intention of the governing body, the world governing body, is basically to just take the temperature of, or just observe what's going on in the world at large and see what we can do to benevolently get everybody on board. What's going on in that piece of the world? What's going on in this? Who needs what? It's extremely benevolent. The strategy is a little bit different from the way it used to be. Like on the Council of Balance, we had half of the council was dark and half of the council was light. This group is it's got a very different quality, largely because it's all women and it's all about feminine nurture and generosity. It's not about boundaries. Although it's interesting. It is a very protected castle. I noticed that in the dream all the time. There's actually a masculine guard that's across a far hall. I just noticed it once. I've only ever seen one other person there that wasn't in the library, and it's a man, and it's a guard, and he's standing there. We do have masculine protection. There's also a certain amount of secrecy around this location. This is why I didn't think I was going to be talking about it, but I guess I am. Hang on a second. Has to do with 5D chess. I was going to talk about 5D chess. There's a I was going to talk about strategy, like strategy of giving. This particular circle, it has an energetic platform of generosity and giving. But there are certain things that need to stay only within that group. We don't want to give all of our, there's a certain strategy that is going to, like if you're able to make it into that group, it means you've passed all of these tests, and this is information that you already know. But I don't want to, so I would talk about it in a closed group. I don't want to necessarily put it out on a live stream. But I will tell you about this one group. I know that it's a large oak table, and that particular group is only for women. And we look at affairs on the lower strata, the strata beneath us, and we figure out ways to connect them with what they need. We watch the levels of development. I guess that's the best way to say it. Who's lagging behind? What do they need? What needs to be adjusted? And a lot of it also has to do with certain industries. So it's interesting. It's a little bit more localized or pragmatic in terms of areas of expertise. The people who are coming in have areas of expertise very similar to an orchestra. Like, yes, you're all musicians, but you all have a different instrument let's say you're all first chair. And you represent a certain population. So for example, Angel knows all about the medical. I'm not a doctor, but she is. There are different groups, different groups and different institutions that have the institutions themselves have certain distortions. I guess that's what I want to say. The institutions themselves have been distorted, and some of this stuff is going to work itself out very, very quickly on Earth, and we're not going to have to plan anything because it's just going to happen. I like that part very much. But mainly our group, it's our job to just watch and make sure everything is running smoothly. Does anything need to be tweaked? And we all have our own area of expertise that is somewhat, it's a little bit regional based. And that's what we're, that's all I'm going to say about that, I think, for now. Let's see. Boy, it was coming in. The channeling was coming in. It was rushing in yesterday. I really just should have gone on last night. This is a much quieter live stream than it normally is. Hang on a second. Energetically quieter. I was going to talk about 5D chess. When we talk about 5D chess, and the political system, in 5D chess, or in dimensional chess, you've probably heard of 4D chess too. It's the same thing, basically. Anytime a given level, it works a lot like normal chess. I don't play normal chess, but I do play dimensional chess. Anytime all of your moves, you're out of anything you can do. You have no more moves you can make on any given dimension, but let's say it's the third dimension. Kind of like right now, the third dimension is at end game. You can't keep playing on this board anymore. If you go back, you're going to go down. You can go down a level, but there are no more moves that you can possibly make that are lateral. So your choice is up or down, and every single person, we're going to let you play on here for just a little bit longer, and then you have to decide whether you're going to go up or down. When you're out of moves in the third dimension and you're in a tight spot and you've done everything that you can possibly do, you've strategized, there are no more moves. Go up. Going up is a good move. You're going to get a lot more space. But most people who are playing on that level, the reason they don't do that is because they don't know up exists. They have no ladder. They don't see interdimensionally. They don't understand how it works. They haven't called it in. It seems like nothing to them. So, and one of the things that I was going to do was talk about the equality of the tangible and the intangible. When we talk about feminine equality, we're really talking about the equality of spirit and matter. That the intangible matters, has as much value as the tangible. Feminine being the space, the void, the opportunity. If you talk about or if you visualize a ladder, you've got the physically based people who look for a rung. If they're or they look for a stepping stone or something solid, they need something solid in order to get them to move forward. So they're going to look for a rung to travel up the ladder. Or if they're crossing a stream, they're going to look for some place to step, a stepping stone. But energy, if you're coming from the top down, you're in a completely different system. It operates a different way, and energy moves like water. So when water hits a barrier, it doesn't pass right through it. We're going to look for a door. We're going to look for the opening to pass through. We are stopped by barriers. We're stopped by something that's too tangible, too solid. In the fourth dimension, it's a realm of the semi-solid, so both of us can exist there. It's semi-tangible. It's just less dense. So we're moving up to the 5th dimension, but 4th density. So we're going to lose a certain amount of our density, which is why we say that in the, and this is something that's never been done before. And probably those of you who are on this call, you already know this. We're moving from the age of Pisces, which was the age of the martyr. The avatar for the age of Pisces is Jesus, Christ consciousness, which required a physical sacrifice for a transition. Like this, when you die, you're released from the physical body. You leave all your material possessions behind, or your material everything. You leave your body behind, and just your spirit goes up. In the age of Aquarius, it's much more laterally based. There's an equality of spirit and matter. So you're relinquishing, and we're at this time of transition where it's kind of like we have one foot in the boat and 1 foot in the pier. We're leaving the age of Pisces behind. So we're leaving half of our material, or half of our density, we're leaving that behind. But we're moving into a lot more flexibility. And it's not like we're not going to have any bodies. We are going to have bodies. We're actually going to have far, far, far more abundance. I was going to talk a little bit about that, the way the system of abundance works. And speed. And colors. How do I organize this material? I always have a hard time organizing this material, primarily because there's a lot of it. It moves very quickly. And it's modular and adaptable. There's the mental realm. When we move into quantum space, it's all pluralism. So there's a lot of components moving, and they're shifting constantly. At a rapid speed. And it doesn't land in a linear order. I was going to talk about when we talk about mass migrations. So I said for a long time I've been saying that I'm in charge of, not the only one, but I do have a pivotal role. I'm in charge of interdimensional migration, mass migrations, and it's large scale orchestration of groups. And I've led armies and I've led orchestras, and I was a composer for a long time. It works the same way. You've got a certain amount of space, and very much like a musical composition for a large number of instruments, the rests are important, and it's like everything has a speed to it. You can fit a certain amount. Also, I'm a painter. I have a degree in painting, 2 degrees in painting, 3 actually. Getting energy to move I was thinking about it. I was trying to figure out how I would explain why we're running into some of the problems that we're running into, because we're trying to move light through matter, and white light has all of these different colors combined in it, but you're also trying to have everybody keep their authenticity, just like having all of the instruments keep the authentic nature of the instrument, keep the authenticity of the colors. That doesn't mean they have to be pure, because every person is a mixture of one thing or another. But the way energy moves, I was trying to figure out a way to talk about the migration of energies and the way we transmute things, and why at certain times we're trying to get through a certain area, and we're just not able to penetrate. We're running into these blocks, and it's incredibly frustrating. And I was thinking, for some reason, I was thinking about yellow and blue, and they're both trying to move through. They can meet at green. It's like if I'm trying to move blue from one side of the painting to the other, I have to find a way to route it. So a lot of the way people are coming in and out of our lives, if we're trying to make progress, we have to, if we're too attached to the people that we were holding on to before, that weren't growing, or maybe they were just in a different, they're in a different bandwidth, they want to go into a different direction. One reason it's really important to let go of a lot of people. There are certain colors that cancel each other out, and you're not going to be able to move forward with the same people. Boy, did I explain that badly. I was thinking of the way we orchestrated the Joan of Arc group. Looked a lot like a Star of David. In fact, it was a Merkaba. And if I'm yellow, and there are two other people in the primary triad, and one's red and one's blue. I'm explaining this so badly. I don't know how to explain it. I think I might abandon this and come back to it when I have an illustration. If I want to move, if I'm the color blue and I want to move through a painting, I have to identify all the areas that blue can move. And in order to do that, like I can look at a color and I can identify how much blue is in that. And that's going to determine the percentage of blue energy that I can move through. And the amount determines the time. For example, if I find a clear stripe of blue, I can move through it very, very quickly because it's pure. If I find green and it's a mid-range green with like 50% blue and 50% yellow, it's going to double my time, because I can move 50% of I have to move through it much more slowly because it's competing with space for yellow. It works that way. And when we incarnate, we choose, it's a lot like coaxial cable. In the physical body, we can only fit so much. There's a whole bunch of ourselves that we have to leave out of body, because we usually, when we come into a body, it's like carry-on luggage. You can only take so many things. You're going to need to take just the essentials for a specific job. So that, for example, that's one of the reasons we came down incarnated as a group, not only in the Joan of Arc lifetime, but in this lifetime too. All of the Joan of Arc people from that lifetime incarnated in my life in this lifetime too. And we all came down with portions to contribute to the pattern, so that we could address what went south the first time and make certain corrections. But rather than moving forward as a group, it's kind of like if you have a group goal and you're all going to make an apple pie, and one person has apples and one person has flour and one person has sugar. But then when it comes time to make the pie, one person shows up and are like, okay, let's make this pie so that we can solve this problem. But the rest of the group scatters, and then we have to go chasing everybody down. Like, what happened? What happened? We had people bail, or like, that's it, I'm taking my butter and going home. It didn't work. We had the school that I was trying to, boy, is this disjointed, sorry. The school that I was trying to start in 2013 was intended from the beginning to go global, get a message across the globe, and also provide free electricity, free housing, taking responsibility back for the education. Basically, I was building it as the world's largest homeschool, and I built this entire thing in energetic form, but I didn't get any help on the ground to land it. So when it landed, it just scattered, and now everybody kind of got the benefit, but none of it came to me. But I did a tremendous amount of work, and now I'm kind of stranded. I don't exactly know what I'm doing next. but I know I'm not going to work here anymore because once again, I got completely rogered. Something is changing very soon, like immediately, where this is no longer going to be my job anymore. I feel like my job is done. The job that I did completely before. Those of you who, I know Joanna, who've had sessions with me, where we were talking about something that is suddenly removed, and when we are suddenly removed from somebody's life and they never really realized how much they were relying on us until we're gone, and that's for a reason. There's only so long that you can ask for help, and everybody just, either they weren't up to it or they didn't get the message, or for one reason or another, the answer was no. Like when your oxygen suddenly gets cut off, you're not going to take it for granted anymore. There's a, boy, I feel like I'm saying this so badly. It's very disjointed. Sorry about that. There's a system reroute. There's an aborted mission. You know how there are fractals? There's an aborted mission that could have gone a lot smoother, but since it didn't, we had to abruptly reroute, and everything is getting redistributed. That hasn't hit the planet yet overall. Like coronavirus was the first wave, but the whole fresh start, reroute, the clean slate, that hasn't hit the planet yet. There's there are two lower levels that still have a lot of figuring out. They haven't really gone through a lot of the dark night of the soul. A lot of them think they have, or they don't want any more of it. A lot of them feel like they've gone through hell, but they haven't really gone through the amount that they need to have the actual change. They may be very unhappy, but if you're still not making the transformative change that you needed to make, that means you actually are not ready to be in the driver's seat. So we can't have you there. There's a sorting process that the entire globe had to go through to determine who is mature enough to be at the top level. I was going to talk about 48 strands, 24 strands, and 12 strands of DNA. There's a way, I'm changing subjects, I know, sorry. I don't know if you could probably tell the energy is not running the way it normally does today. There's a lot of interference. It actually feels like my intuition is coming through sand. It feels very dense and very interfered with in kind of a uniform way. It's not streaming properly the way it normally does. And that's why I'm like really all over the place. I'm getting a lot of kind of refraction, and it's not coming from this group. Normally when I do a live stream, there's a lot of people or more people on, and I'm kind of pulled off by other people's energy. I don't think that's what's happening here today. It actually feels very, it just feels a lot more dense. It feels like there's a bag of sand on top of my head, and I can't see clearly. And so it's just, everything is slowing down, but it's also, it's just not coming through clearly. And I haven't talked about the two things that I've been meaning to get certain things out of the way. I just saw 11411. So now we're going to talk about structure, I guess. That's an 11 gateway, and then 4 is in the center. I keep meaning to, I was going to do a post, and then I didn't. I don't know why, because certain things come up in the news, and I'll get prompted to either do a post or do some sort of live stream about it. And for some reason, this one thing was delayed, but it's kind of been on my mind. It keeps cropping up, and I want to mention it because I never spoke about it when it happened. Something kind of pulled me off. And I feel like with talking to the group that are on the call is kind of preaching to the choir. I guess I'm just going to say it, and then if somebody needs to hear it, they hear it. Regarding the Columbus statues, I had somebody who was a friend, and not a really good friend, but kind of a friend, and when everyone knocked down the Columbus statues, I do know a lot about strategy. I know a lot about injustice, and I also know a lot about group mind and group identity. When we really identify as a member of a given group, it turns into kind of one gigantic ego. I mean, Joan of Arc is the patron saint of France. There's a lot there about the French identity and fortifying the identity of a people and getting them to stand up for themselves, rise to their own empowerment. I've done the same thing with the Jews, getting the Jews to rise to their own empowerment. I really have a lot of this history. So I have a lot of experience about it too, about what there's a certain energetic trajectory that comes with that terrain where you have been victimized, and I don't like the idea of it, but when you've been oppressed, we're just at a pivot point where we're not going to be able to, there's a reason that certain cycles have perpetuated, and they're cycles that we don't want. And if we don't want them to be repeated, you can't expect, it's one thing to stand up for your rights, but you cannot expect the less mature, or the ones who don't know about oppression, or the ones who haven't been, the ones who are the oppressors. They're not the ones with the spiritual maturity. You can't expect spiritual maturity from a population or an oppressive group who does not have it. So telling the other group what they have to do is inflicting, number one, you're asking them to do something that they can't do. The reason we say, be the change you wish to see in the world, is because the only way you can possibly make the change is when you have the ball. You don't give the ball to the other team or the other group and say, do it right, treat me right. Yes, you have to verbalize it also, but the way that when the Columbus statues were knocked down, I had gone on, one of my friends posted something, and she's been very involved in Indigenous peoples' right, and and I'm on her side for real. I am on her side, gung ho. Yes, I totally agree with you. But the way that they handled that was a tactical error. Not just in my opinion, but it's actually true. When they had the momentum, they had an opportunity to, because justice and karma was actually on their side. There's a certain amount of energy, and there's a certain wave of energy that is going to take down where we're looking at white male savagery. And there's a certain wave from the population that is in agreement that this thing has to stop. We're now going to stop this. So the way they handled it by forming a mob and knocking down the sculptures. The thing is, if you have a complaint that somebody did something to you, you need to set a new pattern. The new pattern has to be strong enough that it becomes the new pattern. Patterns repeat until they are changed, but not only until they're changed sufficiently. So white male savagery has a really strong energetic momentum behind it. You can't stop it with a single mob. Usually it's going to take the tapping of a brakes or something. You're like, for example, if somebody goes to steal your purse, you're going to have to use the same amount of energy in the opposite direction to get this thing to stop. But you yourself if you just allow it to go, it's going to continue. But if you do the same thing back, you're just setting the motion in. You have to establish the new pattern. And you have to do it you have to reestablish the correction with momentum and intention of a certain caliber. For example, when they knocked down the Columbus statues, they did so with an angry mob. And then they did the worst thing that they could possibly have done. You had the ball. You had the opportunity. This was very frustrating to me. But they didn't see what they were doing was going to guarantee them that the pendulum is going to swing back. You're going to get, apparently they're not done fighting. You say you're done fighting, but if you really were peaceful, if you really wanted peace, you would be peaceful and you would walk your quote unquote enemy through the change. You're going to have to lean into generosity and into teaching and lean into peace with the enemy and show them what you want them to do instead. You have to install the appropriate thing. You can't merely get angry and so here's the thing. If you're claiming that there's white savagery and they put up they put up a whole bunch of sculptures that means a lot to them. So they made artwork that they invested a lot in. They put their own icons up. They rewrote the stories from history. I understand that. Yes, they did. Was it savage? Absolutely. But you can't tell me that you have the wisdom of your ancestors. If you're one of the indigenous tribes, if you're an indigenous person, and you carry the wisdom of your ancestors, then don't go form an angry mob, because I watched these people do exactly what they said that white men or white population, Western people, did to them, and they did it back. The worst thing they could have done was to form an angry, violent mob and focus all their intention on a religious icon or a tangible item, which is now carrying magical properties. So when we want to charge our water, if you know so much about water and you're all about water rights and water is sacred, blah, 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 which it is, I'm not disagreeing with you at all. But if that's what you're saying, that you're a water protector, then the last thing you want to do is approach an object of veneration that other people venerate with an angry mob, focus group energy on it, then carry it to water and pour it in the water. You just polluted the water system with the energy of war. Do you want peace or do you want war? That was the stupidest fucking move. It was a boneheaded move. Because now you've taken that and you've put it into the city's water system. If you wanted peace, then what you should have done was gone, and I'm not saying this hasn't happened, because I understand that we go and we request and we go and we request. We request. Can we be treated better, please? And they say no. So it's appropriate. Rage is appropriate. But what you should have done instead is give them a time to take it down and say, this is non-negotiable. The sculptures are coming down. You have to lead on the foot of generosity, because all of your energy is going to loop back to you. And if you know a lot about energy, and if you know a lot about water, if you have the wisdom of the ancestors, and your ancestors says you are more wise than the European ancestors, and you say that the Europeans are savage, and they are, but then show us the wisdom. You're going to have to lead out on the foot of what you prefer. So prove it. What you need to do is go to whoever you're perceiving as your enemy. That's just another aspect of you. And you have to go with carrying the energy of sovereignty. And then you have to step in the leadership rather than asking them to give you the leadership. Step into a position of authority and say, this is what we're going to do. I am giving you X amount of time to take down the thing, to protect the thing that you say you value. Somebody put a lot of time and effort. I know, I'm a sculptor. And people have thrown my sculptures out, and I was heartbroken. If you have spent all of the time creating something, tending to something, birthing something, that's a major undertaking, a life-size sculpture, a monument, that's huge. Somebody, whoever it was, somebody made that with a lot of care. So you have to value the fact that somebody did that. Whoever is in charge of protecting that, say, look, this is not acceptable. We demand that you take it down. But since you love it, the same thing you wanted them to do to you, treat them the way you wanted your land treated. Did they fuck you over? Totally. Totally. So now how do we repair it? The library, the group that's in the library in my dreams, it's not just in my dreams, it's happening. When we're all asleep, we actually go there. It's happening outside of linear time. It's happening outside of linear time in group mind. It's a way to bypass linear time. There are a lot of time zones. A lot of people aren't there yet. But one of the things we're doing is orchestrating approaches to solve certain long-standing pervasive problems, like what to do with Columbus statues, or statues of whoever, General Sherman. I said that I thought perhaps there should be a museum of white male savagery. The point is, don't make the mistake of invading somebody else's space. Everybody's young once. Everybody makes mistakes at some point. You want a record you want to keep the growth chart. One of the things that this really stuck out to me. One of the things that happened, hang on a second. Let me go. I'm sorry. I know this is disjointed. Go back briefly to knocking over the Columbus statues. When we charge water, what do we do when we want to charge water for our own benefit? We put stones or things that carry an energetic charge. We put rose quartz or something else that has specific properties into the water so that it permeates and that energy is picked up by the entire thing. So you need to be really careful with what you do with water, particularly collective water. And if you were so group conscious, you would think twice before you simply decide to get angry. And so getting angry is one thing. Expressing anger is important. The last thing you want to do is create an angry bomb, which is another thing that we're trying to diffuse in the masculine collective, is the ignoring of difficult emotions. They know they're not supposed to say anything. They don't want anybody to call them angry. And so they just don't express anything. They ignore their emotions. We're not saying to do that. we're actually having a really hard time diffusing that cancel. Tomer's doing a great job, though. He's in Israel right now. We have a lot of people working on diffusing the heart chakra and getting repressed emotion to flow. So actually, when Trump won, it did allow for collective release of pent-up hostility, which we really needed to have. We can't have progress until that big ball of dammed up rage is vented. We absolutely have to have that. But then when you have the ball, what you need to do is find a way to walk side by side with a thing and teach the other side. So you're going to lead on the foot of generosity. When we talk about group identity, it's kind of one gigantic ego. One of the things, as we step into pluralism, as we step up the ascension ladder, we go into pluralism, multiplicity, and one of the first things that happens as you get portions of yourself back, when you begin to awaken, and your own past lives start to come back to you, the memories of your own past lives start to come back to you. And you remember lifetimes as a Native American, lifetimes as a European, lifetimes as a homosexual, lifetimes as all sorts of things that identities or group identities can no longer be proprietary. And everything is shared. If you go up, everything is shared. Even a single identity. And they're talking to me about the Joan of Arc lifetime being, they said you went down and seeded, you planted a seed and turned on the garden hose so that the entire planet would be flooded with this one template by the time we needed it for ascension. And one of the things about the Joan of Arc identity is that it's a shared identity. They told me something, I wasn't going to talk about this, but since it is seems to be coming through. One of the things they told me, and when I asked about it, because when my own personal memories when they first came back, number one, I was praying that it wasn't true because I had this horrendous, deep avalanche of dread, because I knew what it meant, and it came with a job, and it was just a horrendous dread. Please don't let this be me. Please don't let this be me. But I knew it was. And one of the things they told me is that I was shown I was re-shown actually something that I got a vision one time when I was 9 years old, and I hadn't thought about it in decades. And then when I was like 45, I was shown this vision again. I almost had forgotten I even had it. And they showed me a column of text. It was almost like an article, but it was a single column of text. And it was the whole Joan of Arc story. And it was all written in glowing white letters. And the message came, and then they showed me the capital A. They showed me a capital A, and the message came in that some people carry, also as I'm seeing this, it's 13331. Some people carry a word, some people carry a sentence, some people carry a paragraph. You're the only one who carries the entire story because you were the one who started it. And I got that when I was 9 years old, long before I knew anything about the Joan of Arc. It was just an enormous undertaking and extraordinary pain, just horrible and huge. Where was I going with this? There were, shared identities. When my memories first came back, I remember begging that it wasn't me. I could just tell me that it wasn't me. Tell me it wasn't me. And they did say you're not alone. But even the identity, I was the only one that was in the body the entire time because I came in as a baby. I was born into the Joan of Arc body, and I stayed there the entire time. But there were other people who joined because it was a group identity, and the rest of the group started coming in when I was 13. I started being able to they were kind of at the level above me. And it started with 3, and then there was a large group above them. But that's mirrored, like as above, so below. There's a mirror effect. There's a large group of angels or, galactics or whatever, large group on the top end. And then it came through me. And then the identity was also designed to be picked up and carried, shared by it was meant to be extremely contagious. It is built energetically to be extremely contagious. Not in a bad way, but so that everybody would pick up. So Joan of Arc came down and gave sovereignty to somebody who maybe did not particularly deserve it or wasn't ready for it. But it was basically the opportunity to step into a leadership role. Take matters into your own hands. Claim what's yours. Step into sovereignty. And then part of that energetic template is that you have to be willing to share everything. Be willing to share everything that you are. Because the sharing, the generosity is part of the system, the new system of government, the new system of healthcare, the new system of definitely the abundance. The new system of everything requires we step forward with generosity. So the whole idea of things being proprietary, or I'm not going to share this, it's mine. Was there some of that? Yes, you can claim just what's yours. You can claim your physical body as being yours. There was the entire virgin aspect, which I share my body, just the whole physical portion is what's mine and will be shared with no other person. I determine what happens to my physical body. But when you step up, you step into a generosity of spirit. And that portion, there's a required portion. There's a requirement of sharing. You have to be able to do that. When we look at issues of cultural appropriation, there's going to be a lot of dismantling of certain ideas where certain groups think they're right. And when we install equality as an energetic platform, there has to be a lot of give and take everywhere. So most of the time, when we identify heavily with a given group, number one, we really believe we're right, and we might be. But there's very often just energetically, think about what happens when you identify very, very strongly with a particular group. It's kind of a separation. There's a separation energy and a little bit of a barricade because you're focusing on the difference. When you focus on a difference, it's going to create a gap. That's an important thing. It's one of the things I was going to talk about. When you focus on a difference, you manufacture a gap. You can use that if you want to. If you need a gap, focus on a difference, and that's going to give you a gap. When you want a bridge, focus on a commonality. If you need a way to go forward, if you need a connection, focus on what's common. Focus on the commonality. We're all going to be releasing certain things that we kind of cherished or wanted to possess. There's a certain amount of what we possess that just in the process of transitioning from the age of Pisces to the age of Aquarius, there's a certain amount of possessions that we need to leave behind us. Part of that is like our ideas, our belief systems. If you identify very strongly as being a member of a given group, some of that is going to be relinquished when you get more memories. You're going to realize that you're really just one gigantic Venn diagram, and you've been many, 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 many things. So if you're a designer and you have, let's say, you're a white Anglo-Saxon Protestant, but you're really attracted to, I don't know, Native American designs, and you want to use some designs from something. There are a lot of people who will tell you that cultural appropriation is bad. But once you get more aspects of yourself, where you reclaim them, where you remember them, you get more aspects of yourself, that's just as much yours as anything. Issues of self-denial also have to come down. Part of being free is realizing where we imprison ourselves by what we don't allow to flow to us. That was a huge one for me. Huge, huge, huge. I'm still really trying to take that down. My guides have said you have to step out of all areas where you were heavily reinforced in self-denial. Vows of poverty, vows of chastity, and not only for me, but like the masses. Christianity, what do you not find acceptable that it's for other people, but it's not for you? I have, it's almost like my default mechanism was to be an ascetic. It's one thing that I'm trying to step into flow. I find being generous very easy, but having things come to me is really often very, very much a challenge. Hang on one second. I have to turn on something. It's freezing in here all of a sudden. 1 second. I don't know if anybody's even with me anymore. All right. Whoops. Yeah, it's really cold. Is anybody still here? So cultural appropriation. When we lead on the foot of generosity, what you really need to do, if, for example, I was going to tell this story. It's related. My father was an artist, and one day he was a very, very good artist. He was. But with all art, I don't care who you are, there are some works that are more successful than other works. I went into his studio one time, and he was working. He was not religious at all. He wasn't spiritual at all either. He had a lot of strength, but certain weaknesses. I went into his studio one time, and he was working on a sculpture, a conceptual sculpture, and it was wooden Gothic arches, really beautifully carved. He was a very good craftsman. It was wooden Gothic arches made to look a little bit like a screen, and it was all stained dark wood, and it really looked beautiful. It looked like something you'd find in an antique church. It was about 6 feet high, and they were hinged. And for some reason, it was part of his conceptual sculpture where he was calling this thing a traveling confessional, and it came with an IV. You know, an IV, like when you go to hospital and get an IV, there were 2 IV bags. One was sand, and one was, I don't know what it was. It was something else. It was like gold, or so, like gold particles in solution. And my father didn't pray. He had never gone to confession at all. Didn't really know what either one of those things were. But he thought he did. He didn't ask. He just had this idea. He was very condescending when it came to religion, really didn't have any, he was completely ignorant, basically. But he had this idea, this concept that he was critical of it. He was critical based on what he thought it was. And so he made this elaborate sculpture It's really one of the worst things. I probably shouldn't say it, but it was really one of the worst things that I ever saw him do. He was actually a very good conceptual artist sometimes, but this was one time he really tanked the entire thing. It was terrible. It was well crafted, but conceptually it stunk. And he said, "What do you think?" And I said, basically, you're completely wrong. Your entire concept for this piece of artwork is based on misinformation. And I said, for example, you're making a commentary on confession, but basically the whole idea about the IVs were like, you go to confession and you confess, and like the two IV bags were supposed to represent, like, you ask God for something and either you get it or you don't. It would, because my father had no faith. He didn't believe in God, and he thought that anybody who went to confession or who prayed or whatever, he thought they were basically idiots, and it was intellectually tacky. So this was his commentary on people that he thought were less intelligent. And I had said to him that basically you're confusing the idea of confession with your misunderstanding of what prayer is, which you also don't understand what that is. Because when you go to confession, there's no way God doesn't give it to you. When you confess, you automatically are released of this burden. So it's not like you go into confession and you ask God for something and maybe he gives you gold and maybe he gives you sand. You don't know. But it was a poor idea. It was an example of cultural appropriation, but rather than merely saying, you shouldn't be appropriating from a tradition you know nothing about, which, I mean, I basically kind of agree. I've walked into, Sears or JCPenney or something and seen emblems of Coca-Cola or something. And I'm like, boy, that just really doesn't, there are certain things that just, symbols have power and they really shouldn't be used, tossed around in a way with no reverence when you don't understand what they mean. But if you prioritize secrecy, certain things should be secret, yes. But if you have to watch percentages of energy, because if you prioritize too much on secrecy, or say nobody should ever take from some culture they know nothing about, you yourself are missing an opportunity for expansion. You're missing your opportunity to teach them. One of the things on the energetic platform in the fifth dimension, in the operating system, we're always looking for opportunities to serve. It's almost a compulsion. The same way, if in the third dimension, if you saw the road littered with money, there you'd go around kind of gathering it. If you saw some, you'd pick it up. If it didn't have somebody's name on it, you're like, hey, gather as much of that as you can. In the fifth dimension, the financial model prioritizes service, and we prioritize it's not a deficit, but it's an opportunity. You're going to prioritize the space. And if you see somebody where you have something that they lack, if you have knowledge that they lack, or you have an ability that they lack, you see that they could be doing something better, you don't hold back and prioritize it and keep your knowledge safe. And you definitely don't lob criticism at them. Although I am talking about my father, but he's dead. Do offer it. because the energy that you put out is what's going to come back to you. That's going to be the fundamental propulsion system is based in your heart and based in what you give. In the new system, the economic model is very much like a heartbeat. So basically, you can have as much as you can give. So you're always looking for opportunities to give. So if you see somebody who has a deficit of anything and you do have something, offer it. And typically, you'll offer as much as possible, as much as humanly possible. Unless there's a compelling reason not to. For example, if there is certain knowledge, like knowledge does have to be given in, like there's a reason not to sometimes too. When we look at the path of awakening, for example, Kundalini awakening, where the levels of awareness are built, there are 33 vertebrae, and every single time when the energy goes up your spine, you get an additional layer of knowledge until the circuit is fully running when it hits the base of your skull. And the energy is built, or the knowledge levels are built. So you can't take somebody, you can't jump bandwidth. You can't take somebody who has whose Kundalini is only like at sacrum level and give them knowledge from the top of the spine. It's not going to be able to, they're not going to be able to make that jump. It also would be dangerous for them to do so. There is a sequence, but for example, in my, when I spoke to my father, fortunately he said, "What do you think?" And I said, "I think you don't know what you're talking about, and you shouldn't." He wasn't creating from love. That's a big thing too. When you make artwork, in going forward, there's going to be a lot less artwork and anything else. We're going to base creation on love, what we love to do, what we love to make, and it's not going to be focused backwards on historical criticism. There's not going to be a lot of social commentary, like Banksy's going to change topics probably. If you're focusing on what you don't love and you're using your creative skill to perpetuate that, like my father did that. My father was, his technical skills were good, were really solid, but he consistently, almost exclusively, chose negative things to portray or a critical aspect. He almost never created for joy and for love. Sometimes he did. They tend to be his better artwork, but a lot of it was focused on criticism and getting other people to change, like social commentary. One time he asked me to help him. He was dyslexic, and somebody gave him a 55-page poem about rape from the victim's perspective. It was based on the Gilgamesh. And he really, really wanted my cooperation to help him decide what to illustrate. And I refused to engage. I didn't want to have anything to do with it. He was really livid. He was furious, actually. And he stopped talking to me for a really long time. But because I wouldn't help him illustrate this rape poem from the victim's perspective. But the interesting thing is that I actually did. In his mind, he could invite someone to participate in a creative act, but I didn't have the right to say no. And so I actually did help him illustrate it, brought it right into the real world. He was furious, though, because he didn't actually want my participation as a co-creation. He didn't want to talk about it. He just wanted my compliance. So I actually did give him exactly what he wanted, but he didn't identify that as such. He wanted it in the way he wanted it. He cut me out of the will, actually. At any rate, I wasn't going to talk about that. I was going to talk about, what else do I have on my list? We're going to wind up teaching. I did actually get the chance with my my father's thing on the confessional, the traveling confessional. I think he actually threw it out. He wound up not displaying it, and he was kind of embarrassed that when I said I didn't like it. Actually, nobody else really liked it either. But it did, at least in that time when I went to his studio. At least he listened for 10 minutes. When I told him why commenting, especially so sharply, on somebody else's belief system when you don't know the first freaking thing about it was a mistake. At that point, he had already invested quite a bit of time, materials, and a lot of labor in going down a direction, and then he trashed the entire thing. But when you go in to confess, it's an automatic yes. You're automatically unburdened. So it's not like God is going to say, an external God, if that's what you're believing in, is going to say, no, I'm going to give you sand. You keep that burden. No, all you need is a witness when you go into the confession. And if I lead for, basically what you're looking for when you engage with somebody that you would think of as an enemy, they're not actually. They're just another aspect of you in polarity. So look for the commonality, and then see if you can engage in some sort of a dialogue. Tell me why you think this is the case, and then see about fixing it. Oh, I was going to talk about not painting over another person's growth chart. In this lifetime, when I was going to start the, well, I'm not going to talk about that right now. In this lifetime, I had asked my husband for a divorce, and I knew that I was going to be moving out of the house. And in the corner of our kitchen, I had two girls, and in the corner of the kitchen, from the time they were babies, we had a growth chart for both Cricket and Calico, and periodically you go and you check off their heights. And I loved that growth chart. They love their growth chart. It's an important thing. It's an important thing about their, it's their growth chart. It represents their development. It's not merely a measurement. It's also a bunch of memories, but it's also, I was planning on I was planning to teach them something using it. I never realized that when I asked for the divorce that I wasn't going to be allowed back in that house. I actually thought that I was going to be moving a mile up the road to start a school with my ex-husband and a bunch of other people that I loved. And I thought we were going to all do it for the kids. And that was the original plan. I invited somebody up from the city, a friend of mine from college, and she started having an affair with my ex-husband, but he wasn't yet my ex. I was still married. And that part was fine with me because I actually really just did want him to be happy. But one of the things they did was to paint over the kids' growth chart, which is a massive tactical error. It's unkind to the kids. It's unkind to me. But I was also really crushed because even if you were going to repaint it, you should still keep a copy. One of my favorite things about that growth chart in the corner was that my girls had a bunch of American Girl dolls, which are all 18 inches high. And one day they had taken markers and they said that they were going to measure all their dolls. And they had put their dolls on the floor. And then Cricket and Calico had, here are the dolls. They're all this high. And Cricket and Calico had measured all of them, like 6 or 8 dolls, and all of the measurements were different, despite the fact that all of the dolls are 18 inches. They're made from the same mold. And I loved that. I absolutely loved it. It was my favorite part of the growth chart. And I was planning on using that for as a teaching moment sometime when I was going to take them to the growth chart and talk about how the way we perceive someone isn't necessarily the way they are. And sometimes there are equalities and the differences in height. We measure them. The difference in height came from the person who was doing the measuring, not the doll itself. And I was planning on turning that into an entire lecture. And I was to me, it was the most obvious thing in the world that if you were going to go into somebody else's life, even if the first wife is leaving and the mother of the children is leaving, it seems like the most obvious thing in the world that the last thing you do is take away evidence of the outgoing mother, take the kids away from the mother, reduce the natural mother's influence even further, and paint over the growth chart. Painting over the growth chart, it is so stupid in terms of just kindness and also tactics. It's a strategy where you could not have chosen, well, except she did, or they both did, because they also threw out Calico's stuffed cheetah that she'd been sleeping with. She threw it in the dumpster, and said that it smelled like pee because it had been in my house. There are certain things that when people do it, it's more than a red flag. It's just like a gigantic alarm. Like this person is really spiritually immature and has no idea what they're doing. This person doesn't know how to be a mother, doesn't know how to come in and nurture a situation for peace, for prosperity, for all people. This person clearly has no fucking idea because you created a war from someone who was actively trying to be your friend and give you something. And you deliberately created a war everywhere you looked. Don't paint over somebody else's growth chart. They need it. You're going to need to look back to reference it. And if somebody has cultivated something over time, even if you don't like them, all of the energy that you send out is going to loop back to you. And you can't blame that on anybody. I know that I put up a lot of boundaries as Joan of Arc, and I know I did that for entire countries, and I know that I had that armor to undo. But even as Joan of Arc, I didn't kill the English. I actually looked after the English. Look after your enemy. If you want the system to survive at all, you do need to care for your enemy. There aren't any enemies. I was going to talk about, this live stream has gone nothing like what I planned. I've got all of these notes, and it has really kind of just gone off the rails and stayed there. Hang on a second. I was going to talk about congenital birth defects. Talk about changing subject. Congenital birth defects. When we come into a body, we get the energy body that we had before. When we leave our physical body, when we die, we leave our physical body and we go up and our physical body remains. We're separated from our physical body, but our energetic body that we had in all of our lives, we come back down through that. And we get this basically the same energetic body that we had before. We might get, new upgraded chakras or whatever, but when we reincarnate, we get the same kind of energetic sheath that we had previously. So it contains a lot of our previous history in it, and things that were already affecting. It contains a lot of our history. So if you want to know about somebody's previous history, it's worth noting, worth paying attention to the things people are born with. If you're born premature, well, there are certain lines. There's a reason that certain things are truncated in certain lines. Hang on, I'm getting interfered with. Just one second. This live stream is absolutely nothing like what I planned to talk about. It's very frustrating. I came in this lifetime incarnated with most of my Joan of Arc trauma still intact. And I've been working through that trauma my entire life. I was born with a big divot in my left thigh from where I was shot. Joan of Arc was shot with a crossbow at the Battle of Paris. And I was shot several times. I think I was shot once in the butt, and then I was shot once up here. But I was born with this big divot. It looks like a thumbprint in bread dough, goes all the way to the bone. And I never knew why I had that. I was just born with it. It's just this big, big divot. Now that I'm older, it looks more like cellulite, but it does go all the way. It's deep in, and it looks like a big thumbprint in bread dough. And I know that, even if it was cellulite, the third dimension is not causal. That's where things happen. They coalesce into a form for a reason, because there's something in the energetic field that causes that to form in a certain way. So yes, is it a thickening of fascia? Yes. People will say, cellulite is caused by, or dimpling is caused by attached fascia. Yes, but why did the fascia get thicker in that exact location? And it's denser there because I had a lot of emotional trauma that was still, I was holding on to something, emotional trauma, left over from that particular injury that was still unresolved. And since it's not flowing and loose, it's congested and causing rigidity. So it's more solid there, and it grew as a big dent in my thigh. My ex-husband was born with one leg shorter than the other, and so was his father. And pay attention to any congenital or ailments that you were born with. Take a look at what it's saying about your I guess I'm saying, ask yourself what energy contributed to having that ailment. And if you're asking yourself what it says, for example, if your left leg is shorter, chances are you shortchanged a divine feminine in the past. It's the left side is the female side, it's the past. The right side is active and male. It's something that's happening in the present. So, and if you're also my ex-husband also was born without a muscle in his eye that he couldn't turn his left eye and look that way. It will only ever look straight ahead. So there's something about him that literally cannot, it shortchanges on the left. He's missing a viewpoint. He actually can't even see anything on that side. It kind of keeps him from looking at anything feminine, anything from the past. He can look straight ahead and no further that direction. That's an important thing to pay attention to. What does the the forms say about the energy that comprises that, the mechanism by which it happened. What is that telling you about your body? What is it telling you about your history? If you came into this body with a rare disease, take a look at the symptoms. What about that disease? What does it tell you about the energy comprising it? You need to start to really ask a lot of questions. It's going to tell you a lot about yourself. I was going to talk about, I don't know why I ever expect them to, these live streams to go the way I expect them to go. They never ever do. Going back to American politics in the election, the highest and the level that is most immediately free are the ones that are already stepping into that don't need a president. They want to just step directly into personal leadership, and they're ready to do that. We're not going to have, I spoke about this last time, we're not going to have karma so much because we're off the timeline, and it's almost like calling something instant karma, except we really just don't behave in ways that basically there's more or less instant manifestation of whatever we do. It's instant feedback. So you're not going to have the time delay that we saw in the third dimension historically, where you do something and you might not even be ready to experience, strong enough to experience the karma for it. I heard someone say one time, I think I may have said this before, David Wilcock relayed a story one time that he did a session with somebody when he was still doing private sessions, where he looked in their Akashic records and they had been Roman citizens, and they had given the thumbs down, or they had clapped or cheered when someone was mauled by a lion. And it wasn't for thousands of years later that they were strong enough and spiritually mature enough for when they that they were able to receive the karma for that, because they were finally ready for that lesson. You're not going to get a lesson until you're ready, until it would actually benefit you. If it would just cause you trauma, or it would just damage you further, or you would miss the lesson, then you're not strong enough to receive that lesson. So that's why you're kept in the third dimension, where everything is linear and you're given these little tic-tac sized portions to lead your spiritual development along. At any rate, those of us in the higher level, or those people who are ready for instant feedback. Pretty much I have instant karma now. And there's an awareness that goes along with it. There has to be an awareness that goes along with it, that anything you do it is going to be done to you back. You're opening yourself up for whatever. So if I'm talking about, my ex-husband, or yeah, I'm aware of that. And I'm fully aware that other people can say whatever the hell they want about me. It's not going to bother me. I'm not triggered by it one bit. Let's see. I was going to talk about, I might do this in a different one. Let me finish the layers of the government. So the ones voting for Trump are the ones voting for the most rapid change. The same way when I was Joan of Arc, I voted, if I had a choice between short but excruciating pain, but then it's over, or 20, 30, the rest of my life in prison, it's a faster lift to go through the fast, excruciating change. If you were to measure which side has more pain, believe it or not, it's not stepping into the fire, and it's not the Trump administration. There's far more pain if we were to average it out, because we can look down timelines and say, where's there more pain? Ultimately, there's a lot less pain, believe it or not, with the Trump administration, because it's going to be really intense, and there's going to be this big explosion, a lot of disruption, a lot of upheaval. Everyone's going to get really, really upset, really angry, but it's going to be shorter and it's going to be over. And then the whole point of Trump as president is to basically drop a bomb, break the existing system, and get everyone to rise to doing things themselves, get them away from the institution, get people to step into their own empowerment. And the reason that we're saying he's doing a fantastic job at that isn't because we necessarily agree with his choices. On the lower level, if you're looking for the effect that his choices have had in the third dimension, it looks like he's doing a horrible job. If you're looking from a strategic point of view at the amount of destruction he's caused and the amount of rage that he's been able to vent that was formerly repressed, then he's doing a fantastic job from the level above it. Energetically, there's been a tremendous amount of change that has come out, and also empowerment that has come from Trump. So even when he says grab him by the pussy, honestly, the amount of feminine power, the amount of feminine empowerment that rose up from him saying that. They didn't say he's going to make it pleasant for you. If you want a rise of power, screw with the children, screw with the women. You're going to get a massive rise to almost everybody is willing to say, you know what he should do instead. And then since nobody's picking it up, since he's doing such a horrendous job, doesn't look the way they wanted it to look. There are so many people who like, that's it. I'm going to take matters into my own hand and do it. Do something else. I'm going to be the change. If we're trying to get people out of complacency, standing up and saying, let's do this instead, and really take their full power and take full responsibility for their own experience instead of passing it off onto some parental figure so that they can go back to sleep. That was Trump's job. So that's why we're saying he's doing a really good job. Trump's job at this point in history as a soul is largely the same as mine was. Does it look stylistically different? Totally. When I was Joan of Arc, there was a very long-standing stasis. It was a horrible situation. It was really locked in, and it wasn't going anywhere. So Joan of Arc as an emblem, as a it wasn't an emblem. It's an identity. Goes down as a bomb. Goes down as a stasis breaker or something that's going to cause. There's already a great deal of war. Obviously, it's a 100-year war. By the time Joan of Arc landed, it had been going on for 80 years already. But when you go down as a catalyst for change, that's what I meant to say. Both Trump and Joan of Arc went down as catalysts for change. Massive change on the scale of a country. We're going to go down and we're going to break whatever system you have going. We're going in to take some sort of position and ramp up the energy to such a degree that it can't possibly stay the way it is. And it's a hyper-polarizing thing. That's why I'm saying that they had very much the same role. Hyper-polarization. You're going to create, in certain ways, we actually want to create a civil war because we're trying not to interfere with other people's choices. We're actually part of delivering freedom is saying, I don't care what side you're going to take, but you need to rise to having an opinion and give a shit about something. Even if you're wrong, You have to actually put some emotion, get some movement into claiming some sort of identity, so you're less and less of a blob. We want people to break away from a gigantic group, go off into smaller groups. We're trying to get people to claim more personal power. Then that's a staggered approach. Ultimately, this is one of the things I was going to talk about. I was going to talk about the long-term strategy. It's a really, really large topic. The long-term strategy of getting this planet not to explode. Getting this planet, we knew it was going to explode if it was left untouched and just managed to go the way it was going. We weren't going to get Ascension successfully. We were going to get about 150 people ascending off the planet, and the rest of the planet was going to explode because there was so much energetic stasis and compression that it was all masculine dominant, and there's just no way this thing is going to live. So there was a very long-term strategy starting thousands and thousands of years ago. I'm not going to go through the whole thing right now. But there's a way to get, right now there's a complicated energetic dynamic on the planet that, yes, the planet isn't, it's polar, we're taking how do I want to say this? It's so difficult to talk about. I want to arrange this differently. There's an orchestrated division that ultimately is going to provide freedom and unity, but it has to be done in a certain way. If you think about, and there was a long range plan. I'm sorry, this is so scattered. I'm going all the way. They're doing something with my head right now too. That's all right. It's gone very, very nonlinear. I apologize. If you think about a television screen, if you divide a television screen where it's half black and half white, that's and it's an extreme amount of solid polarity. The third dimension is a container or a contained space in which there's a lot of polarity. Or yeah, it's hyperdual. In order to get unity from that while still preserving free choice, what we've done is divide, even though on the higher levels, in higher dimensions, all is one, but when you're trapped in the third dimension, you don't know that yet. You're not in that state of awareness. You can't access it either. You're too much a part of a clog. The energy is too compressed, and the bandwidths, there's such a massive bandwidth differential that you can't get these things to merge. So there was an orchestrated division. A lot of times in the disclosure community, when we're talking about that people shouldn't watch the news because it's just all orchestrated division. They're just trying to get us to fight. A lot of that is going on, but it's not all nefarious either. A lot of it is really, there is an orchestrated division, but since ultimately at the top level, the dark and the light are the exact same thing, there is no duality, it's all one. There's a way that we're trying to get the entire thing to survive and have everybody go where they want to go. Just give everyone their preference. That's basically the whole thing in a nutshell. If you want freedom, let everybody else do what they want. They're going to sink themselves. You don't have to inflict your will on anybody. If they want money and you don't particularly care, just let them have whatever they want. Except we can't really implement that strategy yet because there's still a lot of power leveraging going on. So let me go back to what I'm going to say. If you take a television screen and you divide it into two, where one side is white and one side is dark, you've got extreme polarity. And those two things are incompatible. They will always fight. But if you divide it again, where now you have, and you put it in kind of a checkerboard pattern, you've got, they're equal, but it's just flipped, it's reversed. If you keep dividing it to where it's a checkerboard pattern, then you divide it again and it's a smaller checkerboard pattern, you divide it again and it's a smaller checkerboard pattern. What we're trying to do is keep that thing going, keep that pattern running, so that every single person has a choice to go, has dark and light within them. And then ultimately you're creating equality and a unified field if you keep dividing and keep dividing and keep dividing, and it eventually presents as static, something like a static field. You're going to get all of these little pixels and you've got unity from division. If you keep the division going and you keep running that pattern, you're going to get a unified field of static. You're also going to get individuation. You're going to give each person a choice between dark or light, and that's freedom. When you have a choice, you have freedom. And then in order to, you can choose for you, but you can't, if you try to apply control to somebody else, that's actually imprisoning yourself, because then you're saying somebody else can control me and inflict a law on me. If you want the government, the world government of the future, there is world government in the future, but it's more energetic, or it's beginning, I should say. There's a staggered approach to the way, the mechanism by which that's happening. There's a staggered approach to the way that we're delivering it. There's an energetic layer on top where we're establishing the energy that's going to descend onto Earth and change the existing structure. There was a point in the American government where the people decided they didn't like this way anymore. So they took it upon themselves to write the Constitution. They took it upon themselves to write the Declaration of Independence. They said, this is how it's going to be. Only it was a group of white men that did that. This time, we're at another period of time in history where once again, we've reached this crisis where we're not getting the representation. Also, we can't. You know, there was a period of time, a margin of time where there was a margin where that could function. It was still in the age of Pisces, and we were coming down, and the avatar was white and male and singular. So moving up to pluralism, you have to remember what area of the galaxy we're going into, what dimension we're going into. We're stepping into pluralism from white. We're dividing into rainbow colors. And I know people will say the white savior model needs to go. And I don't know if I really want to get into a whole lecture about that, but I was thinking about that. And even when you say the white savior model needs to go, I could turn around and argue that in reverse, because it serves a purpose. How are you going to reach the people who need to be reached? You're going to have to get something. You're going to have to get a laser down. And of course, it's going to look like white light. It can only do the one thing. Energy takes a specific form for a reason, and there are certain forms of energy that can be used for specific reasons. And saying that if something is wrong or it shouldn't take the form that it's taking, I think is a misunderstanding of the energy. When we talk about Exodus, Hedra, I was thinking about suicide bombers too. I was thinking a lot about suicide bombers. They've been promised 70 or 72 virgins. When you go up, when you're in a masculine form, this would go for feminine suicide bombers too. when you're in in the third dimension, in a physical form, and you're looking up, you're going up into a space of pluralism, and the space is the feminine realm, and it's new terrain. It's going to, and it's a multiplicity because you're going into pluralism. So it's going to look like a group of virgins because it's new terrain, and it's feminine from the masculine that has, and there's a sudden death in a location. There are just certain things that happen in the circuit. And you can't blame anybody for having this experience when they're there. It's kind of like blaming somebody for being wet when they're in the water. As you pass through this area of the terrain, you get certain experiences. It's designed to teach you something at that time. If you don't learn it, you're going to go around for another loop until your time's up. But there's a reason that when they say that they're going to get 70 virgins when they die, that's not necessarily inaccurate. We might be, you can understand why they're perceiving it that way. They're getting a multiplicity of fresh terrain women. It's feminine energy, multiples. And if you look at the number, whether it's 70 or 72, if it said, 7 stands for spiritual, so it's up. It's a spiritual path. 2 is for partnership. And if it's 0, even if it's 70, it would be 0 for source. So spiritual and source. It amounts to basically the same thing. I can understand why they think, why that message came through, that if you kill yourself or if there's death down here, you're going to get 70 virgins as a reward when you go up there. That's probably accurate. I mean, they're seeing it that way. I can see why it comes through, and I can see why it changes the since that's a huge portion of the religion, or since the boy, I'm sorry, I'm falling asleep. It has had a large effect on collective consciousness. I don't mean it's a huge portion of the religion. I mean it's had a large effect on collective consciousness. So now it's got its own morphogenic field. Let's see. I may come back and do the rest of this tomorrow. Did I talk about? Yeah, I did. Okay, I think I'm almost done with this for now. I was going to talk about insurance. I'm not going to do that today. I'm going to, the next live stream, this is one of the things I had hoped to do it now, but I'm not going to, because I'm tired and this whole thing is kind of going wonky. I'm getting a lot of interfering energies on this one, much more so than usual. Sometimes in the beginning of my live streams, there's a lot of interference, and it sometimes takes me a while before everything really starts to run. And this time it's been like a heavy bag of sand on my head the entire time. It doesn't feel like it's clearing. It feels like it's a weight. I wonder why that is. I'm not enjoying it at all. Okay, I think, and I've got all of these things, but I think I'm going to talk about it next time, because I feel like I need to go to sleep immediately. All right. Yeah. So my name is Stephanie R. Hogarth. If you're listening to this on YouTube, you can find me on Facebook. If you're able to make a donation, I would hugely appreciate it. The next live stream, I'm going to talk about the way we're moving through realms by percentages. And I'm going to talk a little bit more about the 48 strands, 24 strands, and 12 stranders, and being supported by others. So this is very strange because we had relatively few people on here. But the next video, I want to talk about the new financial distribution system, the way it operates, and the fact that we move it by percentages of energy, energetic investment, and the heartbeat being the propulsion system. That's important. All right. If any one of you want to book a private session, feel free, or just call me. Okay, I love you. I'll talk to you later. Bye.